You've been rising in silence, shedding layers no one knew you outgrew. While someone was still playing pretend, you became emotionally invisible to them, and now, they feel it like a cold draft in a locked room. The laughter you once offered freely has dried up in your throat. The way you used to light up when they entered the space. Gone without ceremony. It haunts them. Not because they lost your attention, but because they lost your spirit. And they can sense the difference. They're unsettled. Rattled. Because your absence isn't just physical, it's something cosmic. Like a thread that once held their chaos together has unraveled, and they have no idea how to stitch it back. If this spoke to you, subscribe and join the journey. There was always something strange about how they disappeared right when the connection deepened. Moments when they'd vanish into themselves, dodge clear questions, offer smiles that didn't reach their eyes. You didn't want to believe your instincts, so you gave them the benefit of the doubt. But behind the curtain, a whole other life existed, a life that never made room for you. Not just some secret fling, but a full-blown second world. Years deep. Commitments sealed. Promises whispered to someone else while they looked you in the eye. And now, as their deception starts to suffocate them, they're scrambling. Not to love you right, but to trap you in unfinished stories and fabricated attachments. They've realized too late that you've already left, and what they feel now is the echo of a door that was shut without sound. There was a moment, so small, so quiet, that they now replay over and over again. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't storm out. But something in your presence became muted. Your gaze began floating past them. Your replies, once filled with subtle devotion, became flat and unbothered. There was a weightlessness to your mood that terrified them. They noticed when you started reacting late, or not at all. They felt it when your stillness stopped matching their rhythm. A chilling realization gripped them, not that you were angry, but that you were detached. And nothing is harder to reverse than a heart that's already taken its final step away. The change wasn't loud, but it was irreversible. They tried to reason it away at first, thinking maybe you were just tired or distracted. But when distance became your default, and effort turned into absence, the silence told the truth louder than any words could. The moment your energy broke free from their pull, panic took over. But instead of reaching for healing or apology, they reached for control. Suddenly, they were playing a different game, one stitched together from fear, pride, and a dangerous sense of entitlement. They didn't expect your exit to feel so permanent. They thought they had time to figure things out while keeping you within arm's reach. But the certainty in your withdrawal shattered every illusion they built. For so long, they'd played the role of emotional puppeteer, adjusting the closeness when it served them. But now, the strings are gone, and so is the puppet. That internal collapse triggered a shift in how they saw you. You stopped being someone they valued, and started becoming something they were terrified to lose. That fear. It's warping their next move. The conversations they're preparing will sound like sincerity, but they're not rooted in care. They're crafted to reset the balance of power. It's not affection that's motivating them, it's the thought of losing their last grip. The emotional chaos they're about to unleash. Calculated. Sudden emergencies. Hollow promises. Emotional hooks dressed as romantic confessions. And worse, they've convinced themselves that tying you down physically will bring your loyalty back. They think creating irreversible circumstances will undo the damage they caused. But none of it is about building, it's about binding. And the desperation behind it is fueled by something even they don't fully understand, the terror of facing their own emptiness without the comfort of your warmth nearby. They're not just feeling regret, they're unraveling under the weight of it. Alone, in the silence they created, they're being swallowed by a sorrow they never anticipated. The echoes of the life you once imagined together have become a torment loop in their mind. They revisit every moment you dreamed out loud, plans layered with hope, a future built on trust, and now all of it feels like broken glass scattered across their conscience. What's haunting them isn't just what they did, but what they destroyed. If you once shared something deeply rooted, they now walk through the ruins with heavy feet and hollow breath. The knowledge that they forfeited something rare, something possibly irreplaceable, is cutting deeper than they can admit to anyone, especially themselves. They sit in a reality they chose, yet none of it feels real anymore. Their current surroundings now look like a poor imitation of what could have been. In the quietest hours, their mind drifts back to the visions you once painted together, intimate plans, joyful what-ifs, whispered ideas that once gave them purpose. Those thoughts now feel like thorns against their chest. If there were promises exchanged, or dreams of deep commitment, they're now shackled by the memory of how easily they let it slip. Even strangers embracing on the street become silent reminders of a life they lost by their own hand. And as this weight crushes them, desperation begins to boil. They'll soon mask that pain in performance. The guilt is real, but instead of transforming it into growth, they'll use it as leverage. Grand gestures, hollow assurances, and theatrical claims of change will follow, but none of it is anchored in truth. These are not acts of healing, they're distractions designed to soothe their own shame. They'll promise growth they haven't pursued. They'll speak of sacrifices they haven't made. And in their mind, those shallow offerings should be enough. What they fail to realize is that surface-level gestures can't reach the depth of what they destroyed. They underestimated the fire in your standards, and they're about to get burned by their own illusion of control. They thought your strength came from silence, but it was vision that made you untouchable. What broke the cycle wasn't distance, anger, or even heartbreak, it was the moment you stopped seeing them through the lens of who you hoped they were, and started recognizing them for who they really are. Every covert move they made now stands exposed under the spotlight of your awareness. Every excuse they offered sounds hollow in the face of your discernment. You've crossed a threshold they can't follow, and what used to confuse you now reads like an open book. That shift in perception, that's the force that lifted you out of their orbit. You've stepped into a state of knowing where their influence no longer reaches. And nothing unsettles them more than a person they can no longer fool. That unraveling wasn't instant. It unfolded in layers, first a feeling in your gut, then a trail of moments that didn't sit right, and finally a flood of understanding that could no longer be unlearned. You began piecing things together, the contradictions, the reactions that didn't match the words, the spaces in their stories they hoped you'd never explore. It was a quiet revolution within you. Not everyone has the courage to open their eyes all the way. But you did. And in doing so, you stepped out of a fog most never escape. The kind of truth you've embraced doesn't just liberate, it threatens every lie that relied on your blindness to survive. They're not losing you, they've already lost access to the version of you they manipulated. And that's what's ripping them apart. They can't forecast your next move. Their old tactics fall flat. The blueprint they once used to control the dynamic has become obsolete. You've sealed the doorway they used to slip through. And now, they pace in circles, trying to find a crack in the wall you've built from self-trust. The absence of your emotional availability feels to them like losing oxygen. Not because they cherish your presence, but because they depended on your openness to manage their own chaos. Their confusion is growing. They reach out to people who might still be close to you, comb through your digital shadow, and try to decode things they were once certain about. But all they find now is silence, and that silence is roaring louder than any confrontation ever could. They never expected you to become the mirror they couldn't escape. All the chaos they unleashed, all the games they played, have now returned to them tenfold. They thought they could break you into submission, but instead, you became the one who broke the illusion. And now that the illusion has shattered, they're spiraling. The more power they lose, the more outrageous their tactics become. You'd be stunned to know how far they're willing to descend just to reclaim a sense of dominance. It's not love. It's not regret. It's fear of no longer being able to write the script in your life. And deep down, they know exactly when they lost that control, the moment they underestimated your clarity. The origin of the collapse goes deeper than what's visible on the surface. Long before things unraveled, they were laying down the wrong foundation. From their very first interaction with you, they moved with detachment and self-interest. Not once did they build anything real, they simply carved out a space for convenience. Conversations wilted because they refused to water them. Promises faded because they were never rooted in intention. They operated from a space of self-preservation, never pausing to consider how their apathy starved the connection. Now, those early decisions have come back around, and all the false starts are devouring them in silence. They thought consistency could be faked later, that sincerity could be sprinkled in when it became convenient. But hindsight is tormenting them. The emptiness you feel now is the byproduct of all the moments they decided not to show up. Instead of anchoring the bond with presence, they drifted. Instead of giving you certainty, they gave you questions. And now, they're left with a pile of missed opportunities and a flood of awareness that they caused their own ruin. They played with the idea of love, thinking it would wait for them indefinitely. But love moved on, because you did. What they didn't account for was your ability to detect repetition. Over time, you realized their behavior wasn't random, it was routine. The same neglect. The same emotional sabotage. The same surface-level charm masking deep avoidance. You started to trace the outline of a cycle that had nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. You saw how they recycled the same wounds in every new situation. The mask cracked, and what you discovered wasn't just carelessness, it was a pattern. And that pattern had nothing to offer you but repetition, confusion, and emptiness. What made the shift irreversible was the moment you stopped seeing yourself as the exception. You stopped believing you could heal what was never nurtured. You stopped holding your breath waiting for them to grow. Once the spell broke, you no longer participated in their drama. You stopped translating their silence, stopped decoding their passive aggression, stopped chasing crumbs. Your spirit stood up and walked away, quietly, completely, and without permission. And that exit? That's what they never planned for. They're watching the power dynamic crumble, piece by piece, unable to rebuild it. They tried to convince you that they were complicated, that their life was too busy, too hard, too messy. But in truth, they were indifferent. The way they repeatedly abandoned plans, failed to show up, left you waiting, those weren't accidents. They were silent lessons. They were grooming you to expect less, to question your worth, to redefine what love should feel like. And for a time, it worked. You doubted yourself. You made excuses for them. But the more they failed to show up, the more the universe showed you who would. Then came the last straw, the moment that rewrote everything. You exposed your heart, hoping for depth, and were met with emptiness. The conversation where you shared something raw, only to be dismissed like it held no weight. It wasn't just hurtful, it was clarifying. That was when you stopped offering yourself so freely. Your energy became guarded. Your emotions no longer ran toward them. They noticed the shift immediately, but they couldn't name it. They only knew something precious had slipped away, and that no apology, no gesture, no imitation of change could ever bring back the version of you that believed in them. They didn't expect your distance to become a doorway they'd never pass through again. The silence you created wasn't just absence, it became a boundary they couldn't cross, no matter how loudly they knocked. And now, panic has taken root. Not the kind that makes someone reflect and grow, but the kind that breeds chaos. They're spiraling, clawing at every strategy they can conjure to wedge themselves back into your life. What's coming next won't look like love, it'll look like sabotage disguised as sincerity. They're preparing to orchestrate scenes that grab attention, force sympathy, and shake your peace. But this time, their tricks will collapse under their own weight. The desperation has expanded beyond you, it's infecting everyone around you. They've begun weaving a narrative, not for truth but for control. They'll handcraft stories to feed mutual acquaintances, hoping those half-truths blossom into doubt. They'll use flattery, guilt, and confusion as bait, hoping someone you trust pulls you back into the cycle. Their story will cast them as misunderstood, heartbroken, misrepresented, while painting you as impulsive, manipulated, or cold. It's a social ambush masquerading as concern. But what they don't realize is that you've stepped into a clarity so strong, it no longer trembles under outside pressure. There's a kind of protection around you now that's not visible to the eye, but unshakable in spirit. You didn't just walk away, you ascended. And when someone tries to follow you with low intentions, they'll find themselves blocked by unseen forces. Every attempt to distort your truth will dissolve. Every plan rooted in deception will hit a wall. What they're about to learn the hard way is that your spirit is under higher jurisdiction now, one that doesn't allow manipulation to masquerade as reconciliation. Their schemes won't just fail, they'll backfire in a way that exposes everything they tried to hide. There's something they never accounted for, your awakening. That inner moment where you looked at the situation and felt a shift so profound, nothing could make you accept less again. You didn't just gain perspective, you gained sovereignty. And now, that sense of self-worth is glowing from within you like a warning light to every toxic energy that dares approach. You know now that what you were offering wasn't desperation, it was devotion. And what you received in return wasn't love, it was survival wrapped in strategy. That imbalance can't exist in your world anymore. You weren't placed in their path to be broken down, you were placed there to be the lesson they never saw coming. They expected to find someone who would bend, wait, shrink, explain, and settle. Instead, they met someone who became the line they couldn't cross. You pulled your light back, and now the shadows they created are swallowing them whole. They're no longer trying to win your heart, they're trying to regain access to the influence they once had over your emotions. And that door, once closed, doesn't open without transformation. Pretending to change will no longer work on someone who sees through performance. They thought your presence was a privilege they could keep on standby. Now they're realizing it was a one-time invitation to something sacred, and they let it expire. Every stunt they pull now, every dramatic message, sudden appearance, or public display, is rooted in the same old fear, that they're losing their grip. But the truth is, there's nothing left to grip. You no longer orbit around their approval, attention, or apology. You've become your own gravity. And that's the part they can't rewrite. Your soul isn't interested in being pursued by someone trying to win back power. It's calling in something real, a connection that nourishes instead of drains. The illusions are fading, the drama is thinning out, and the emotional fog they tried to keep you in is finally clearing. You're not cold-hearted. You're not going through a phase. You're reclaiming your peace. And the further you walk in this truth, the louder your freedom becomes. Let them watch. Let them panic. Let them plan. Because what's coming next for you doesn't answer to manipulation, it responds only to authenticity. Some ties don't fade, they corrode from the inside until nothing pure remains. This connection has become more than a disappointment, it's become a threat to your emotional equilibrium. Each encounter leaves behind a residue of exhaustion, disorientation, and doubt that takes longer and longer to cleanse. This isn't partnership, it's erosion. It chips away at your peace, at your insight, at your ability to trust your own instincts. The time has come to stop adjusting the volume of this noise and simply cut the signal altogether. This isn't about cooling things off, it's about eliminating something corrosive from your path, once and for all. There's a very specific reason why no halfway measure will work anymore. Something sacred is being aligned for your arrival, and it cannot manifest while you remain tethered to something so distorted. This situation was never built to last, it was built to reveal. And it's done its job. No more space needs to be made for apologies that never come or conversations that only go in circles. The past has spoken, and it spoke in vanishing acts, in unspoken goodbyes, in the echo of things left unresolved. This isn't about one mistake, it's about a series of silent decisions that told you where you stood long before you accepted it. You tried to hold the structure up while the other side refused to meet you halfway. What you carried was never light, but your love made you think it was worth the strain. And when things collapsed, you didn't run. You stepped back in, hands bleeding, trying to rebuild something sacred from the ruins. But every time you tried, they returned with the same patterns dressed in different words. You wanted healing. They wanted a loophole. And now, the structure that once held meaning has decayed into something unrecognizable. What was once a connection has become a wound that won't close until the source is removed. Every promise they broke didn't just disappear, it settled into your nervous system. Every time they didn't show up chipped away at your ability to believe that consistency still existed. And now, every glance back only delays the arrival of what's meant to take its place. There's nothing left to talk through. No final explanation required. The silence they left you in has already answered every question your heart once carried. The truth is, this was never a balanced exchange. It was an emotional debt that kept growing while you paid interest in self-worth. And what you know now is too important to forget. What's next for you requires clarity, peace, and elevation, none of which can coexist with the chaos they bring. Letting go isn't weakness. It's intelligence. And cutting ties isn't heartless. It's necessary. Because some things aren't meant to be repaired, they're meant to be released so you can finally rise. It's not your job to salvage something that was never respected. It's not your task to explain why your soul chose peace over confusion. The person who made you question your own value does not get to narrate your healing. Let them wonder. Let them wrestle with the silence. What comes next for you is too sacred to carry the weight of what should have been. You're not just moving on, you're transcending. And this time, there's no looking back.